Andy, I don't even know if you can hear me. I'm sorry that I didn't come for you, that I wasn't there. Andy, please understand. I have to stay here. The fog is moving inland, away from the beach, towards Antonio Bay.
And that is Stevie Wayne, your nightlight from The Fog. One of my favorite horror movies. Adrian Barbeau as Stevie Wayne. This is Will. This is horror of it all, and this is low budget horror, and why it's the best. It just is. The cheaper, the more bargain basement, but not cheap looking and not cheaply made. There's a difference, and that's what we'll talk about. So, what's the reason? What's the, I could say, psychology? What's the sort of flavor, the vibe of a cheap, or I should say low budget, say cheap, inexpensive, affordable. Excuse me, even you can say even micro budget, I guess. Zero to low budget micro. But what is the reason that I feel, that most people feel, most horror fans, and just the numbers don't lie. It's always the lower budget, the inexpensive, the cheap made, or the cheap movie that's not cheaply made, but always seems to deliver the best scares, the best frights, and becomes sort of legendary, iconic. So we can go over, right, our favorite cheapies. Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Evil Dead, The Cheap Dead. What's with the dead and low budget? Something about cheapy deadies, deadites, cheaps. But there you have it. That's just a small listing. Then we can go to Halloween, The Fog. These are movies that have made millions, millions, hundreds of millions, yet they were made for a fraction. They were made on a shoestring budget today that would be looked upon as laughable. So then you wonder, is it just because having no money, low budget, having little money or no money makes a person more creative, makes that director, producer, writer, those filmmakers more creative? What they have to make do? Or is it then the look? Because when you don't have the top cinematographers, the top equipment, post production, cameras, such, even lighting, all these things matter to a film. And when you don't have those things, this is partially my theory, is that it becomes darker and nightmarish because you don't have all the great gear and the lighting. So it becomes muddier and darker. But in the hands of a really, excellent and skilled filmmaker like a Sam Raimi, like a John Carpenter, like a George Romero, they make do. And so they, the final product. The Fog is a good example. Carpenter filmed in anamorphic widescreen, which is usually, I guess maybe back then too, in the 70s, or I guess 80, but late 70s, that you always would film in a more low budget ratio. And Carpenter said no. So that impacted that look. And the fog is beautiful. The panoramic views of the coastline in the fog. And obviously, if it's about the fog, you want to see, this long weather pattern, so to speak, spooky weather pattern moving along the coast. So he did the widescreen, and it really delivered. So that's my theory overall. I mean, we can go through lots of sort of bullet points, lots of pros and cons. But to me, if you're trying to create a nightmare, I mean, this is essentially what horror films are, right? Essentially, they're little, you know, 90-minute, 2-hour nightmares. Certainly, nightmarish moments throughout. Even the Twilight Zone, many were thrillers or almost horror, and they were these little sort of films to just bring you into a nightmare, a waking nightmare. And if you have a lot of money, you want to, spend it, polish it, Make this a big sort of maybe movie or epic, and you can fail. Right off the bat, I look at The Haunting, the remake, not the original. And it is, I'd say it's a good film. It's an okay film. I prefer the original far more. I've gotten to like it a little bit better. Catherine Zeta-Jones, Liam Neeson, the cast is good and it's well done. But that's a great example I found, one of my first, where I looked at, I was like, oh, okay, the Haunting remake should be interesting and all. And so much money was spent, so much flash, so much, dazzle and sizzle that it's like, where's the story and where's the true chilling moments? And then that's a ghost story, and a lot of the ghosts were sort of realized CGI. That's another, point that I want to go over. Digital is great. Digital is, I love it, but I love it more for science fiction, for even comedy, for magic, sort of fantasy, Lord of the Rings, Merlin, stuff like that, where it's because it's so magical. It's so sort of, transformative. Now, it's getting to the point where it's completely almost photorealistic. It is. So maybe that's changed somewhat. But I just think the practical latex makeup, fake blood, props, animatronics in the real practical sense on set still is best for horror. It is real, meaning when you make a real, prosthetic hand or head or body that you're going to cut or injure for a horror movie, it's real. The camera is filming it, even though it's an FX prop, but it's real. The shadows, the lighting, and there's a consistency and a sort of you know realness that when a person handles it. Whereas CGI, it's getting very close now, okay, but it still is like it's a drawing, it's animation. It's not in the camera. Not real. It ain't real. Now here's the info on The Fog, what Carpenter did back in the day. The Fog was a two-picture deal with Avco Embassy along with Escape from New York. It was shot, The Fog, on a reported budget of 1 million. Although this was essentially a low-budget independent film, Carpenter shot it in the anamorphic 2351 format, preventing it from looking like a low-budget horror film. Filming took place from April to May 1979 in Hollywood and on location all around the state. Point Reyes, Inverness, and the Episcopal Church of the Ascension in Sierra Madre. And this is very interesting. After reviewing a first rough cut of the film, he was dissatisfied, Carpenter. Recalling the experience, quote, "It was terrible. I had a movie that didn't work, and I knew it in my heart." So he added the John Houseman, the beginning, the prologue scene, and ramped up, I guess, scares and certain other scary, moments, violent moments, gory moments, such. So it was just sort of like almost a campfire ghost story. And he looked at it. He's like, "Oh, I fucked up. I better fix it." This is great too. Adrienne Barbeau at the time was Carpenter's wife. She had never appeared in any other film before, a feature film. But she was in a TV movie, Someone's Watching Me, and that was Carpenter. So that was her first film, and then she also appeared in Escape from New York. Tom Atkins, a co-star, a friend of Barbeau's, was cast as Nick Castle, and The Fog was his first appearance in a Carpenter film, and then he also appeared in Escape from New York, and then Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, one of my favorites. And that was produced, though, and scored by Carpenter. It was not directed, but again, going over, Carpenter's one of the true low budget, and then he got, great big budget films too, but that he specialized in so many great low budget movies that were not cheaply made, cheaply produced perhaps, but not cheaply made. And then you have George Romero with the first, of course, Dead movie, Night of the Living Dead, and then Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead, all low budget, increasing in budget. Certainly Romero got more money, to make Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead, but Night of the Living Dead, sort of like in like Blair Witch, these are movies that are made on nothing. They literally, get their buddies or get, very, no name actors, just pick an old house like Night of the Living Dead. Is how many locations? There's a summit opening on the cemetery scene. Barbara goes into the house and it's all in the house and that's about it. So you get, cheap locations, easily affordable to film in. You get some no-name actors or buddies or, acting school, students, and you write a interesting script and try to, film it as best you can. Evil Dead, same. Sam Raimi, the same. And I think, of course, as I've gotten older, I still love horror films, but it's very much of a young people's game as well in terms of the producing, the filmmaking. I mean, certainly middle-aged and older filmmakers can do it too, but these people fresh out of high school and college, in film school, they want to do something. And the cheapest, the most affordable, the easiest in a way is to do a horror film. You're not going to be able to do a huge, rom-com around the, world globe-trotting or sci-fi battle, movie because it's bucks. It's the dinero, right? So show them the money, and if they don't got it, they go into horror, which is awesome. So the advice that many big directors now, or journeymen sort of directors, to film students or wannabe filmmakers with horror movies, stick to it and don't worry about the budget as much. I mean, today, of course, years ago when Halloween, Evil Dead, Night of the Living Dead, you had to have a lot more money in many ways because you had to get film. You had to buy film cameras with actual film, buy the film stock, and have it developed. And then if things fucked up and you had to keep doing retakes, forget it. Who was it? I guess was it Kubrick, or I was the other day I was reading an article. Whatever director, I think it was Kubrick. He did so many takes, but another director, if it was him, they were always so worried about the budget. Probably wasn't Kubrick. The point is, because in terms of takes, I do not. Oh, I was actually it was Melissa Francis, who used to be in Little House on the Prairie, child star, and Michael Landon, who was the producer and director and writer of many of the episodes. I mean, he kind of was Little House. He was this sort of, you know, auteur of Little House. So she said he was a great, person and director, but if you did too many takes, he got annoyed because it cost money. They had another film stock, another roll of film. Today with digital, you don't have to worry about that. You can do 1,000 takes. You could just keep rewriting over the hard drive or whatever. You can even make movies with Apple iPhones. People have done it. Now, it might not be as good as a true feature. It's close, though. It's very close. Once you get that digital information, those digital files, post production, dress them up, and yeah. So, but the bottom line to me to it all is that horror can be made at any budget. Certainly, it can be made at any price, and as much money or as little money as possible. But keeping that production slimmer and more inexpensive and more nightmarish usually means you're not spending lots of money, and you don't have to. So again, when you have the big budget, there's that push, I think, in that, compulsion, spend it, get another amazing location and set, or, CGI. And that will take away, I think. Again, Night of the Living Dead, you look at that movie, it's still such a shocker. Oh, I was Psycho. Now, made by one of the most respected, one of the most talented directors in the world, Alfred Hitchcock, and he made it on a sort of a shoestring. He used his TV crew. Now, he had to because I guess the studios wouldn't bankroll it and such, fine. But what he produced was a fraction of his budget. Psycho is still one of the kings of shocker horror. But I was, continuing with Night of the Living Dead. What Romero did with the money he had is extraordinary, but maybe in ways that's why it's better. Because if he had a million or two, if he had a lot of money, maybe he would just pick multiple locations and the story would have changed. It's such a claustrophobic shocker. It's such a, intense experience only in that house, only with those zombies coming in. And it's been emulated, and it's been copied so many times. And it primarily, or certainly a factor, was the budget. He couldn't have many locations transporting people and such. So there you have it, my friends. It is the season. 'Tis the season of horror. I hope you're enjoying lots of horror. I'm watching a lot of, rewatching a lot of classic horror. I rewatched Halloween 3 the other day, Season of the Witch. I just love that movie. I love all the Halloweens, the Carpenter one certainly, but that one never gets as much play. It never gets as much sort of respect. So go watch it again. Halloween 3, I recommend. So go watch Cheap Horror. It's the only game in town for me. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you're still subscribing, or you will subscribe. It's free, but you can also do a paid people $4.99. It's up to you. Either or, we love having you here. Keep the messages and feedback coming. Go watch something to scare the shit out of you. We'll see you soon.